Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a fascinating and honestly pretty cynical historical framework. This analysis traces exactly how power structures have motivated human labor throughout history. It's this dark, witty look at the actual operating systems that ruling classes have used to, get things done. So buckle up, because the progression we're about to look at, it might just fundamentally change how you view your daily grind. The source material hooks us right away with this brilliant little thought experiment. Close your eyes for a second. Imagine you're part of the ruling elite. You're in that tiny, tiny minority that actually runs the world, and you've got millions of people under you. Here's your ultimate management problem. You need them to wake up every single morning and work. Not just when the mood strikes, right? Not just when they feel inspired. Every single day, for their entire lives. How do you actually pull that off? Well, that brings us to version 1.0 of human motivation, physical force. According to the analysis, the earliest global business model was incredibly simple. It relied entirely on brute physical force. It basically boiled down to a super direct transaction. Pick up that stone. Why? Because if you don't, I'll kill you, right? The immediate threat of violence. And for a really long time, this was exactly how the world's monuments were built and its fields were plowed. It's intuitive, sure, but as a long-term strategy, the source objectively frames physical slavery as not just a moral failing, but as a genuinely terrible management system. Think about it from the elite's perspective. Look at the flaws. You have to constantly feed and house your labor force. You have to endlessly guard them. And here's the kicker. Forced people absolutely hate being forced. They're going to do the bare minimum required to avoid punishment. Plus, you've got an extremely high flight risk. The second you look away, they run. Clearly, the elites needed an upgrade. To fix those glaring flaws, they pivoted to version 2.0, war and religion. Enter the first great psychological motivator, which is war. Because nothing gives a population a sense of purpose faster than a shared enemy. With survival on the line, wartime economies become the most productive in human history. People willingly work insane hours. But as the source points out, war has one fatal flaw for the elites. It ends. Peace eventually breaks out, and when it does, motivation absolutely tanks. People start looking around and asking, why am I still working a 14-hour shift if we aren't fighting anyone? To fix that temporary nature of war, rulers needed something permanent, something that lived inside people's heads. Religion solved this perfectly with the so-called Protestant work ethic. This framework is wild because it turned grueling manual labor into a moral duty. The source notes that monks built Europe's roads and farms not because someone had a whip, but because they believed their labor was literally a prayer. And as a management system, the analysis argues this scaled beautifully. Older religions, with their petty, dramatic, arguing gods, they were a bit too disorganized to align a massive workforce. But universal religion, that was a massive system upgrade. One God, one absolute truth, one unified moral code. It didn't just organize single cities. It perfectly aligned entire continents under one synchronized system of internal motivation. The time mark is on, right? As science and secularism kind of chipped away at faith, civilization required yet another upgrade. Version 3.0, the nation and the machine. Our evolutionary journey brings us to the era of nationalism. The source points out that humans naturally love belonging to something bigger than themselves. The concept of the nation, complete with crisp uniforms and catchy anthems, gave empires this powerful new sense of belonging. More importantly, it gave them a highly convenient legal excuse to sail across the world, conquer, and extract wealth just to, cover expenses. It was a fantastic system for the elites, right up until the absolute devastation of the two world wars shattered that romantic myth entirely. With those grand external myths cracking, humanity shifted focus to a single, easily quantifiable symbol: money. This triggered the Industrial Revolution. Why work hard? Because the more you work, the more you get. The source paints this vivid picture of humanity turning into a giant, hypnotizing machine. Literally, a machine that could astonishingly mass-produce 40,000 identical chairs before you even took your lunch break. Productivity just absolutely skyrocketed. But here's the crucial point. This raw, early capitalism had a major catch. It completely stopped treating people as humans. Suddenly, your value was strictly whatever the market said you were worth this quarter. You weren't an individual anymore. You were reduced entirely to a labor unit, a productivity metric. It was ruthlessly efficient, but just deeply, deeply dehumanizing. And that brutal efficiency brings us to version 4.0, the post-war compromise. For a brief moment in time in the mid-20th century, the system tried something totally unprecedented. The motivational deal struck between the ruling class and the working class was actually incredibly straightforward. It was built on high wages, strong unions, genuinely affordable housing, and the ability to easily support a whole family on just a single income. The social contract was clear: work hard, and you are guaranteed a decent, comfortable life. But the analysis asserts a fascinating counterpoint here. It claims the elites absolutely hated this compromise. Why? Well, because a truly worker-centered society doesn't just distribute financial wealth, it distributes actual power. When workers have strong unions, disposable income, and free time, they actually get a say in how society is run. And for that tiny minority at the top, sharing power was just completely unacceptable. So to take back that distributed power, the elites needed a new strategy. Enter the 1980s. We saw a systematic rollback. Unions were aggressively crushed, corporate regulations were gutted, and that cozy post-war compromise was thoroughly dismantled. But here's the catch. You can't just make life systematically harder for millions of people without sparking a massive revolt. You desperately need a brand new, highly effective replacement to keep everyone motivated. Which brings us to the final upgrade, the invisible chain. Welcome to modern consumerism, folks, where the deal fundamentally shifted. Back in the mid-20th century, the promise was work hard to build a good life, which naturally builds strong communities. But today, the new promise is work hard so you can buy more stuff. Your worth in society is no longer judged by your character, it's judged exactly and solely by what you consume and display. The source argues this consumerist model solved absolutely everything for the ruling elite. Think about it. When you give people actual wealth, they build communities. But when you give them consumerism, you isolate them through digital jealousy. You encourage massive, crippling debt. Most importantly, you take people who should be collaborators and turn them into jealous competitors. According to the analysis, this makes working-class solidarity virtually impossible. And here is the ultimate cynical genius of our modern system. Think back to the start of this explainer. A traditional slave knew they were enslaved, right? They felt the whip, they saw the guards. That is exactly why they rebelled. But a modern consumer? They don't know they're in a system of control. Even worse, the source argues they choose it voluntarily. The chains of modern motivation are completely invisible, entirely self-imposed, and wrapped in the comfort of luxury goods and digital dopamine. So, we'll leave you with this highly provocative final thought from the analysis. If you voluntarily participate in a system and you actually find the scrolling, the buying, and the consuming pleasurable, will you ever revolt against it? If our modern comforts are really just the latest, most sophisticated form of invisible management to keep us working, what does true freedom actually look like? Definitely something to think about the next time you clock in.